Did you know that the Command & Conquer 3 and Red Alert 3 were once planned to be proper esports titles? Tiberium Wars and Red Alert 3 even had its own local scene and tournaments, where you could find such famous StarCraft 2 players as Apollo, Aegis or even Avilo. There is some evidence that Electronic Arts was certainly planning to grow these RTS games in this direction, but something went wrong. And today we'll see how and why.
And unfortunately for Master Leaf, his Marv is set upon before he can jump anything inside of it. No engineers, no grenadiers, no rockets to help out this Marv. It's just this is the kind of stuff that he needs to do, just the slow, methodical inching forward carefully with his units. And the Cryogeddon is what kicked all of this off.
If you somehow missed the good old days of the RTS genre, let's have a brief recap. The Command & Conquer series was one of the most popular RTS series in the world, with the first title having sold more than 3 million copies. Red Alert 2 followed the same success, and the games were beloved by the community. It had great live-action scenes, interesting factions, and overall action-packed gameplay with a variety of units. And, of course, the memes.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
In 2007, Electronic Arts were ready to release the long-awaited sequel, Command & Conquer 3, and this time the company started a new advertising campaign. EA was clearly planning to grow CnC series as a brand for many years onwards, and the game needed a strong community to follow it. The game industry, by the way, was also changing. With the internet becoming widespread and accessible, you could maintain your games longer with patches and new content, as well as attract new players. This is part of the reason why Command & Conquer 3 was marketed as RTS Sport, a serious game with really tough competition online. For this purpose, Electronic Arts created the so-called Battlecast. It was a centralized website designated for better viewer experience. You could schedule matches, watch other people play, and download replays. So basically all the necessary features for esports and casting. Another thing that separated the new CnC game was the balance and approach to the multiplayer. This is extremely clear with the Red Alert 3 example, which was pushed even further in terms of competition and esports applicability. This game followed Command & Conquer 3 and was released in 2008, featuring a lot of new cool stuff that was previously unknown to the Red Alert series. While the game itself was a bit cartoonish and filled with humor and stereotypes, the multiplayer aspect was as serious as it could be for an RTS. In the previous game, Red Alert 2, the balance was very odd, and you would be mostly forced to rush tanks against your opponent. While it was a blast in single player with a great variety of cool unit concepts, the multiplayer was extremely harsh and annoying for casuals. In the new game, however, you need to use combined arms and different units to achieve a victory. Each faction was completely different from another, and each unit had a special ability that you could use. Suddenly, the amount of new strategies and microcontrollers surged, and the matchmaking got much more entertaining. In addition to more micro-focused battles, there were two other significant changes. First of all, each map had a large body of water that could be used to your advantage. Most buildings and a good number of units could traverse these water spaces, creating a new dimension in fights between players. Before it was only land and air combat, but now you could use naval warfare to dominate your opponent. It was possible in Red Alert 2 as well, but the new title made such strategies common, not just a niche tactic that it was in the previous game. Additionally, Red Alert 3 abandoned the concept of warfields. In previous games, your collectors would be traveling across the map to gather resources, which in turn made them vulnerable to enemy attacks. It was also hard to follow for viewers, as players could have 5, 6 or sometimes more than 10 collectors at once, making it really difficult to observe who has an advantage. The players were generally incentivized to strike the collectors and avoid head-to-head fights. Red Alert 3 introduced ore refineries to make it simpler and easier to protect, since now you only cared about a couple of harvesters on a few small, restricted areas. Despite that many people disliked these changes, the game turned out to be quite interesting to watch, with the skill ceiling rising to a new level. Even nowadays, there are many small community-run tournaments and events, and there is even a 50,000 subscribers channel named Cybert, with amazing CnC casts on it. EA hosted a few tournaments, and there were also different local events, but it never really grew larger than its local community. And it's difficult to tell exactly why, but here are 4 possible reasons. First of all, Red Alert 3 wasn't marketed nearly as much as a competitive RTS as it should have been. Instead, it was centered around its campaign, cartoonish style and stereotypical humor. The target audience for Red Alert didn't really care as much about competitive multiplayer and pro level, rather they were looking for entertaining and exciting single player. But the new game was specifically designed to be different from the previous legend Red Alert 2, and casual players were not expecting to see a serious competitive environment because they associated the Red Alert series with fun units and a bit of arcade gameplay. On top of that, the balance wasn't nearly as good as it should have been, which also hindered the matchmaking popularity. The second reason was beyond the gaming industry itself. Red Alert 3 was released in 2008, the time of the global financial crisis, which naturally closed many roads and opportunities. Electronic Arts was cutting the workforce by 6%, looking for new workers overseas, and it was simply not the best time to raise the company's budget with new projects. Apart from that, Red Alert 3 wasn't really a total success, and while it was received warmly, many people didn't really find the game as attractive as Red Alert 2. The third reason was the infrastructure. Sure, you could have esports tournaments and leagues, but it was a lot more difficult to monetize the game. There was no Twitch yet, only Justin TV, and YouTube was on the growing. It was simply much harder to attract advertisers and new customers back in the old days, and I really doubt that game websites or community forums could compensate for that. The esports wasn't a big thing in 2008, maybe only in South Korea where people were in love with StarCraft Brood War, meaning there were little chances for Red Alert 3 to succeed anyway. Red Alert 3 couldn't grow to become a big esports title during the first 2 years. While it still had a somewhat active scene, the developers were no longer interested in maintaining and upgrading the game. Uprising DLC didn't even have multiplayer, and the new Command & Conquer 4 was a complete disaster, basically killing the whole Command & Conquer series. Red Alert 3 didn't receive many patches and no new content whatsoever. There were no even hints of any development process. Eventually, in 2014, GameSpy servers closed down, and Red Alert even lost its official multiplayer, and Electronic Arts didn't even care to create a dedicated server for the remaining fans, although it was later done by the community itself. So that's the story for Command & Conquer series. Lack of big efforts and wrong time led to it never becoming a popular multiplayer game, unfortunately. And that's it for today. Check out more artists esports content on the channel, and as usual, have a nice day and see you next time.